Hi, the topic of this session is creative industry and development. In the field of foreign policy and diplomacy, creative products are most often understood in the context of public diplomacy. In public diplomacy, media has been one of the most important elements from early on. Since the first appearance of international radio broadcasting in the 1920s, countries have engaged in psychological warfare to control the public opinion of enemy countries through radio waves. Moscow Radio and Voice of America, which began broadcasting in 1942 to combat Nazi propaganda, are among the most well-known examples. Psychological warfare, which is also called propaganda through international broadcasting, expanded further during the Cold War. After the Helsinki Declaration in 1975, the United States began to send shortwave radio broadcasts to Eastern European countries to promote democratization in Eastern Europe. Since then, international broadcasting has become more powerful through the Internet. In 1990, CNN in the United States dramatically confirmed its influence. Concepts such as the CNN effect, which refers to the influence of public opinion in foreign diplomacy, emerged, and Britain, France, Russia, and China launched their own international broadcasting in response to the United States monopoly on public opinion. A lesser-known but important diplomacy based on creative industry is development cooperation. In the narrative of global development cooperation, the developmental role of the cultural and creative industries became recognized relatively recently. The first international meeting took place at Stockholm in 1998, and the Stockholm Conference was dedicated to the interdependent relationship between development and the flourishing culture. Since 1998, however, the discussion had been dormant until a decade later, when the United Nations organizations resumed the narrative on the cultural and creative industries as feasible development options and one of the best bets for economic development. And in 2013, the Second World Congress after the Stockholm was held in Hangzhou, China. And this Second Congress called for placing culture as the fourth fundamental principle of the new international development strategies, together with human rights, equality, and sustainability. Although Sustainable Development Goals are not devoted to culture as a standalone agenda, it includes more explicit references to cultural aspects than the previous Millennium Development Goals. Creative industries are considered to have capabilities to provide jobs and incomes, particularly benefiting women, youth, and the small and medium-sized enterprises. In tandem with global recognition of the role of the creative industries in development by international development institutions, partner countries are receptive to the developmental benefits of the creative industries. For instance, in Ghana, the name of an association of producers in the city of Kumasi is Creative Arts for Development, and this name reflects the self-conceived role of film producers in economic development of the nation. Beyond a rather simplistic economic calculation, creative industries can play an instrumental role for social cohesion. Africa, the continent in which most of the least developed countries are found, is characterized by diverse cultural, linguistic, and religious groups residing side by side within borders drawn in an arbitrary fashion by colonial Europe. Furthermore, demography of the continent is marked by the youth bulge. Looking at the employment rate of young people aged 15 to 29 in Europe, the youth employment rate in the cultural industry is higher than any other industry. And this data resonates further in Africa, of which the median age is below 20. Acknowledging the developmental potential of the industry across the continent, the African Union launched the African Audiovisual and Cinema Commission in 2019. Now we can use information and communication technologies to grow the creative industry and connect it to profit generation, development, and economic growth. Furthermore, the cultural and creative industry shows a higher employment rate for women than most traditional industries. For instance, in the United Kingdom, the proportion of women in the economically active population is only 47%. But more than 50% of workers in music industry are women. Additionally, compared to other industries, the creativity and innovation of individuals or small business owners often have a positive effect on success in the creative industry. For example, in Canada, more than half of game developers work independently and operate individually. We can see this positive link between the growth in the creative industry and job creation in Africa as well. Nigeria's successful film production industry, which is called Nollywood, has become the second largest employment market in Nigeria after agriculture. The film industry in Nigeria creates jobs for approximately 300,000 people, and about 2% of Nigeria's gross national product comes from the Nollywood. In this session, we talked about the link between the creative industry and development. In the study of foreign policy and diplomacy, we often understand the cultural and creative industry in a framework of public diplomacy. And it is true that the cultural and creative industry plays a very important role in the public diplomacy. On top of that, I also introduced a new perspective of looking at the cultural and creative industry from a perspective of development and development cooperation. Thank you.